Hello, welcome to my quarterly sprint video for the fall 2017. Man, it's not fall 2017, winter 2018. What am I talking about? Anyway, the theme of this quarter, right, is quarter ends March 20th, and then you have spring break and a couple more days and a conference deadline. The WIST User Interface Systems Technology Conference actually is due April 3rd. So that is going to be my first paper and possibly the Collective Experiences team's first paper. And that's what we're really aiming for. So the real goal of this quarter is to produce a publishable paper for WIST. Okay, so breaking that down, how do I get there from what we have right now? There's two parts to this, right? To the collective experience paper. If we're thinking about writing, right now I'm closely collaborating with Jenny and Allison and the rest of the collective experience team to write a paper with them on collective experiences. There's two components of collective experiences. Right now, we're kind of defining collective experiences as a language is like a programming framework that you can program real people to do reactive programs. So things that trigger with people's real-time changing information. That's one component of it. The other component that sits separately is what is that real-time information that define the uniqueness of a person being able to participate. And while that could be really simple things like, oh, when someone comes in a certain geofence area, that's kind of like how if this then that technology works right now, or if at a certain time something happens, or if this person, I think the geofence example is a pretty good way to describe real-time context of a person changing. That's fine and dandy, and that's pretty easy to define, but what are more complex situations that you could define? These types of situational triggers that will, as people's situations are changing through time, they're moving through their environment, their situations or their affordances, the things they can do in their environment, change. And we want to build a system that can both trigger these types of experiences, trigger these types of situations, so detect through time when a user is moving, but also the flip side is to make a compelling collective experience. You can think of collective experiences like ones where long distance loved ones want to connect and form like a mental bond with one another through a shared, almost augmented reality experience. So think of two people, different places, different states, but looking out toward the water romantically at the same time, listening to the same song, right? That type of synchronous collective experience can happen only if you're able to trigger those two people at the same time and coordinate their actions. And you can only do that first through detecting that they both share the same situation. So it's detecting those situations, but then also for someone who wants to create an experience, being able to express a situation. Okay, right, that's how Affordance Aware and the Collective Experiences project fit in with each other. The Affordance Aware project is more my piece that I've been chipping away at last quarter, and where I sit with that is a great interface that has a lot of affordances to express these types of situations. And I've done a couple, small pilot studies with a couple users, and just me being the main user, trying to produce different experiences. And the tool has some really interesting features that can capture certain situations, and they detect, and those situations can, theoretically be detected by just giving a GPS location. And from that GPS location, we're inferring certain things about your environment and the things you can do in your environment. So that creation tool is still in the works. There's two key components of that creation tool. Again, affordance aware should be evaluated based on how well you can express things, and two, once you've created those expressions of situation detectors, how well can they detect? On the expressibility side, my hypotheses around the prototype I've made is that it can help you think of situations that are interesting. So there's this aspect of creativity. The second is it can help you conceptualize what situation you already have in your mind into a format that computers can understand. So it's really just like being able to make your abstract idea concrete and sensible. I think there's a third. Let me come back to that in my design log. But for the detectability, there's two other metrics, which is how accurate is the detector that someone does create. A detector can be like, oh, I can send a ping to someone at a park and just hope they're walking their dog. Lots of people walk their dogs at parks, but how accurate could a detector be like that if not everyone at the park has their dog? The other piece of that is, since you want in a collective experience maybe some engagement and the triggers need to happen for a certain number of people for the experience to work, you want coverage over some space of users. So if users are deployed in Evanston and Chicago, where I'm filming this video, and I do something like I want an experience where people can play around at the beach. Well, I think that actually could work in Chicago because we have that lakeside front. But if it was playing at the beach and sunbathing, it might be harder during winter. So for the particular time in which you're deploying, there has to be some measures on the coverage of how often will this trigger, if any times will fire. So that's kind of the space in which we're working. I have to make some arguments, and I have some evidence, good intuitions about how expressible these detectors are working. I've done usability studies like that. So I need to refine what the measures are. We have to get closer towards, okay, the prototype is looking good. What arguments can we make? And then what mechanisms in this system makes it work the way it does, that users can actually express what they need, or they can express ideas that they wouldn't have thought of. What mechanisms? And then how to measure those mechanisms. And there hasn't been enough study design or metric design or measurement on my part. I'm still developing features right now. Like this past week was thinking about how users would think about detection accuracy and detection coverage better while conceptualizing, right? You can conceptualize, and then during that conceptualization process, the creator should also be thinking about these, practical constraints about actually running the experience. So those are two focuses. I have to flesh out that part about detectability, and that also comes to the actual measurement at the end of the day is getting it running in the collective experiences platform. If we do write that paper together,